everyone, my name is Sapna. I am a member of UAEM North America's coordinating committee, and I've been involved with UAEM since my freshman year at UCLA. And I was lucky to help start up the UCLA UAEM chapter with a few of my friends at the beginning of my second year at UCLA, which was fall of 2019. And I just graduated this past June. I'm still based in Los Angeles, and I work here at UCLA in a research lab. So still very connected to the campus and UAM and the Xtandi campaign, which is what we did at UCLA. So this campaign is what introduced me to UAM and the whole access to medicines movement in early 2019. So I'm very excited to talk about this campaign today, some background information about the campaign and how we are closer than ever to increasing access to this medication. So ultimately, and how we need your help. Okay, so Xtandi is a late-stage prostate cancer drug that was developed at UCLA. In fact, I remember my organic chemistry professor in my freshman year showing us what the compound enzalutamide looked like. And he mentioned that this life-saving drug that was developed on our campus was such a huge deal, and it's super cool that it was developed on our campus right here at UCLA. So UCLA is such a huge research institution. So what's important here is that the research innovations developed on this campus and other publicly funded universities is that all of this research is publicly funded, or in other words, funded by taxpayers. So as we know, a life-saving drug does no good if the people who need it can't afford it. And in the United States alone, nearly 1 in 4 people report difficulty affording their medications, with the United States spending about $3.3 trillion a year on healthcare and 10% of spending for prescription drugs. So we know that the access to medicines movement, and specifically the drug pricing crisis, is so huge in America. And for Xtandi specifically, there's no alternate effective therapy currently in use. So for people with prostate cancer, Xtandi is huge, it's life-saving. So a little bit more background about Xtandi and UCLA and that landscape. So after Xtandi's development, UCLA held 3 patents on Xtandi, and like universities often do, they licensed it to pharmaceutical companies for marketing and distribution. So they first licensed it to Medivation, which is a San Francisco-based biotech firm, for $500 million. And so Medivation later entered an agreement with Astellas Pharmaceuticals to further develop the drug and market it within the United States. Then Medivation was acquired by Pfizer. So there were 2 companies, Astellas Pharmaceuticals and Pfizer, which receive huge profits from Xtandi. And so currently Astellas also holds exclusive rights in Xtandi's patents through at least 2027, so for a while. And a few years ago, many students as part of UAM urged UCLA and the University of California branch to call off its patent war waged in the New Delhi High Court over enzalutamide. So this was in 2016 when generic manufacturers began to develop affordable generic versions of Xtandi in India, which is where Xtandi does not have a patent. UCLA filed a patent claim with the New Delhi High Court, which would prevent the drug from reaching the market and patients who desperately needed Xtandi. And so UCLA Health's actions as a result then ensured that Pfizer could continue to have this worldwide monopoly on Xtandi without facing competition from generic manufacturers. So as a result of UCLA Health's decisions, many patients across the world cannot have access to this drug. And I'll be talking a little bit more about how inaccessible Xtandi is. So technicalities aside, what does this mean for patients? So this delay in enabling other generic manufacturers to develop cheaper versions of enzalutamide directly affects access to the drug. So India is home to a major generic drug industry. And so activists believe that if India is able to create these more affordable generic versions of Xtandi, so many more patients will have access to it. And once again, it's life-saving. And so it has huge potential to save lives and really, really change the healthcare system. So through an American lens, for example, prostate cancer is the second most common cancer among American men, with over 3 million American men living with prostate cancer living with a prostate cancer diagnosis as of 2016. And prostate cancer is also the second leading site of cancer among males in large Indian cities, which, keep in mind, India is the same country where the manufacturing of generics is being inhibited. So in the United States, currently accessing Xtandi and having that treatment costs more than $150,000 per year. And understanding how prevalent prostate cancer is and how expensive $150,000 a year is just to stay alive, it's really, really important for us to encourage access and to fight for access for this medication. And in the United States, it's more than $150K per year. In India, it's roughly 40 times a person's annual income in that country. And an earlier study a few years ago showed that Xtandi was anticipated to become within the top 5 drugs by worldwide sales in 2020. So very, very important drug, just understanding the prevalence of prostate cancer and understanding that Xtandi is one of a kind in that there are not other treatments or similar treatments to prostate cancer. So something we stress a lot about at UAEM is that Xtandi was funded by the public. So pharmaceutical companies rely on public universities for research and development. And as a result, universities can and should leverage this advantage to negotiate licensing contracts, to increase access to these medications worldwide. And Xtandi was developed using federal funds from public tax dollars via NIH funding and Department of Defense grants, so the public must reap its benefits. And that is why UAEM targets universities so closely, is because universities are such huge players in the access to medicines movement. And something that we stress a lot about universities is that they have often publicly focused missions. The point of developing these innovations is to improve the world, is to have more people have access to these life-saving medications. So if the decisions that universities take inhibits access to the same medications that are developed on these campuses with public funds, that's a big problem. And so that is what UAEM and this campaign is hoping to target. So this is a little bit about what our advocacy at UCLA looked like. So UAEM, along with many, many other groups, including professors from Yale, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, many other students within UAEM, were urging the UC Board of Regents to drop the patent claim in India and allow Xtandi to be sold at an affordable price in underserved communities, both in the United States and abroad. So what you see here in these pictures is from a UC Board of Regents meeting back in, I think, early 2019, which is when we did this. And so what started off as these larger scale demonstrations and speeches at UC Board of Regents meetings slowly developed into more intimate conversations with the Technology Development Group at UCLA, or our TTO, or Technology Transfer Office, to introduce new socially responsible licensing. So what's really, really exciting is that we actually won. And so the university did go on to introduce new guidelines for ensuring access to new medications, but these guidelines were not applied to Xtandi, which is the drug that mobilized UCLA students in the first place. So if you are interested in learning more about this action and this campaign, you're really encouraged to go check out White Coat Rebels, which is a documentary that features some of this work, and Netta Ashtari, who is a medical student who spearheaded so much of this work at UCLA. So go check that out if you're interested. But beyond UCLA, there was also a lot of advocacy at the national level. So UAEM, along with other organizations, petitioned the NIH to grant a march-in request for Xtandi on the grounds that the price of Xtandi in the United States was so excessive and discriminatory, and that US residents were being charged the highest prices in the world for a prostate cancer drug that was developed right here at UCLA with public funds from the US Army and the NIH. But then the NIH rejected the 2016 case on the grounds that Astellas only had to make it available to the public and that there were no further regulations on making it available to the public on reasonable terms. So that's kind of where we come in right now. So after the NIH denied the 2016 March-in Rights request for Xtandi put forth by UAEM and other organizations, Pfizer and Astellas continued to raise prices because the NIH's actions allowed for these companies to continue price gouging for Xtandi. So, for example, from 2015 to 2019, the average price of a 40 milligram capsule of Xtandi to the US Medicare program increased more than 32%. And so this is still going on, and the longer we wait, the higher the prices become. So just last week on January 14th, UAEM wrote to the Department of Health and Human Services, the HHS, with the intention of joining the petitions to grant March-in Rights on the patents for Xtandi. So we specifically are asking that the HHS urgently holds a public hearing to provide supporters and opponents of using the March-in Authority as an opportunity to present evidence in support of their positions. So that's our goal. And a little bit more about March-in Rights. So under the Bayh-Dole Act, which is known as the Patent and Trademark Law Amendments Act of 1980, the federal government can exercise March-in Rights to remedy this unreasonable drug pricing that we were talking about. And March-in Rights refers to the government's ability to do this specifically, and to author third-party licenses to federally funded patents if the original patent holder fails to make the invention available to the public on reasonable terms, which, as we mentioned, it is very, very out of reach, so very unreasonable. And so if the government were to exercise these March-in Rights for Xtandi, other generic manufacturers could produce a generic version of this drug, which would increase competition and then therefore reduce the price substantially. So there's a lot of potential here to make Xtandi widely accessible. So the other important thing is that now is such a critical moment, because if we're thinking big picture, Democrats, along with Republicans, have been promising to combat high drug prices for last many elections previously. With Medicare Part D and Build Back Better, there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of meaningful action on high drug prices, which is why it's important for us now as constituents to push the government to doing better and telling the government, not only is it important to talk the talk, but it's important to walk the walk as well. And another important thing we do want to note is that access to Xtandi is not just a human rights issue, but it is also a racial justice issue. In the United States, Black men have twice the prostate cancer mortality and 60% of a greater incidence of prostate cancer than white men. And that's from a paper in Nature, cited on the screen there. And also the Stat News article that I had mentioned earlier mentioned that African-American men or Black men experience among the highest prostate cancer rates in the world. And prostate cancer is also the most common cancer diagnosis in Hispanic or Latino men in the United States, amounting to more than 20% of new diagnoses. So it's clearly a human rights issue, clearly a racial justice issue, and it's a huge point politically for politicians and for the government to step in and do the right thing. And so another huge reason as to why we're fighting for this so intensely is that using March-in Rights for Xtandi can set the legal precedent, set the moral precedent for many other publicly funded medications. And it's so critical that if we win this, we can continue to use March-in Rights as a tool to increase access to so many other life-saving medications that were funded primarily through the public and by the public. So really establishing that this is a plausible and very reasonable path to grant access to so many of these other medications. And thus it really does have so much potential to change the paradigm of drug pricing and patenting in this country. So this is where you come in. We would love if you could take some time right now to call Secretary Becerra's office. So we have two numbers on the screen right now. The first one will likely work better, but we just provided both in case you wanted to use those. So the first number, it might take a little longer to get in contact with them. I believe there will be like a busy tone and you have to wait a little longer. So be patient if you can, and if you have the time for that. And here is a calling script that you're welcome to use or adapt to your liking. And yeah, so if you have any questions right now, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'll go ahead and pause the recording for people watching at home, so then they can call at their own time. So I'll go ahead and pause. Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everyone who just got on the line and called the office. We're really, really trying to target the HHS to having this hearing. So we really, really appreciate you calling. Cool. So we also will be circulating some graphics, some sample tweets, this call script as well. So please, when you get the chance today or later this week, please share amongst your networks. And especially UCLA students, we always, always appreciate you getting involved. So please email us. I put my email along with Ambika and Rhea, who are also two alumni of UCLA, who were in charge of the UCLA UAEM team and working on this Xtandi campaign. And we'll be posting graphics and tweets and resources on our Instagram handle, which you can see here, and also our Twitter. And if you do post anything, please use the hashtag #TakeBackXtandi. And we're super excited to see what we're able to do with this. And thank you so much for amplifying this and getting involved. And we appreciate it a bunch. Okay, thank you. Bye.